and welcome to Last Week On, the podcast where we take our favorite TV shows, movies, books, video games, everything, and we go back through them. My name is Adam Straughan, and joining me once again at the very finale on this journey, all the way through The Last of Us, the Ellie to my Joel, it is Mr. Joey Dean. How are you doing?
Hello. I'm so happy that I get to claim Ellie in this situation. I'm doing
Figured you would.
great. Ellie's the best.
Oh, yeah.
I
The
I,
absolute
I adore
icon.
her. I adore
Mm-hmm.
her. And being able to relive Ashley Johnson on this episode and hear the original Ellie's voice was just so it warmed my soul.
Absolutely.
So much fun. But I'm doing great. Yeah, the weather's getting warmer. It's been 9 weeks of The Last of Us. We are
Mm-hmm.
exiting the cold tundra of winter and moving into uh beautiful blossoming flowers.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of blossoming flowers, everyone, if you didn't know, Adam is quite the gentleman and such a sweetheart, and gifted me a thank you gift on aiding him in this process of reading The Last of Us to filth. And he gifted me this 3D clicker skull from I know I've seen this skull. I know it was in designed artwork. I don't know if it was like official artwork or what it
Mm-hmm.
was, if it was something like from exactly the show, but it's obviously a split open clicker head with this beautiful flower coming out of it. Stunning,
There you go.
aesthetic, nerdy. I mean, it's literally me in a 3D printed gift.
What else
So
do you
thank
need?
you.
No,
Thank
of
you so
course you.
much.
Thank you, Joey. But like as you said, like this is the ninth week now. We've been doing this for 9 weeks, literally every single week. We haven't missed a single one, and we're here at the finale. And honestly, that like gift is just a thank you for me for like taking the time out of your very busy schedule to sit down every single week and just go through The Last of Us. It's a passion project for us both. We both love it so much, but as well, it's just been fun. And like here we are now. Joe and I were talking before this, and I was just saying how that 9 weeks has gone just like that. It just shows you how quickly like the passage of time can go, but this has been fun. This is the way I love to podcast. This is the way I love to do this, where, every week you come back to a TV show that you love. Like if people that aren't aware, like I also covered Invincible, the TV show. That was the previous TV show that we did as well. Done a couple of episodes of like random one-offs as well, where we've covered Kill Bill and like we've spoken about the butterfly effect. And watch this space. That's all I'll say, because this isn't the end of video game coverage. And obviously,
Mm.
this is TV shows as well. So from next week, or maybe the week after, there's going to be something a little bit different on there. So yeah, I won't say any more on that. I'll just surprise you with that at some point.
Nice. Well, I'm excited for sure.
Yeah.
I reiterate and I mirror what you're saying. I loved so much to be able to dive deep into something that I've held near and dear to my heart that
Mhm.
originated as a video game.
No, absolutely. And I remember like, when we first, Joey and I were out on a night out and like we first spoke about this, and like Joey said to me, like, are you going to cover it on the podcast? And I was like, oh, I'd really love to. And we're just like, oh my God, it just made sense. Like we were both in the right place, the right time. We're like, let's just do it. And here we are. And it's just been incredible. And as well, congratulations to you, Joey, like for never really hosting or co-hosting a podcast, but yet stepping up to the mantle and just being an incredible co-host all the way through this. So honestly, you would never know you've never done it before. So this
Thank you
has
so
been
much.
honestly experience for you as well, but it's just been a pleasure to do.
Well, I've been able to weaponize my bachelor's degree.
There you go.
So it came to use finally.
Yeah.
No, I'm definitely no, I'm not shy to being on camera. It's something I've done over the past 10 years, never in this type of intellectual space. And to be able to overlap the intellectual and the creative and meet the abstract with,
Mm.
information and analysis is kind of my meat and potatoes. I love doing it.
Mhm.
So I'm honored to have been here, and I will say before we even jump into this episode, Last of Us season 2, I'm in.
All the way.
I am
Yes.
in.
Yes. And I am excited for that. Oh my God. Excited to cover that because there's going to be so much to go in. And obviously, there'd be nobody else I would do it with, Joey. So, speaking of The Last of Us, for the last time this season, we are looking at the finale, episode 9, Look for the Light, which is beautifully titled. It nicely bookends the entire series because episode 1, When You're Lost in the Dark, and then we have the second part here, Look for the Light. Beautifully done. Just that little subtle detail works. It's just magic. but yeah, like this is the finale. And just overall, before we dive into Joy, like what was your kind of like overall thoughts on this finale being a finale of The Last of Us, and obviously with the video game as well.
Originally, when I heard it was 45 minutes, I was a little bummed
Mm-hmm.
and I was a little nervous. We might have briefly spoken about it in one episode in passing, but I trusted they would know what to do. Everything they had done up until the point that I learned that it was going to be 45 minutes was A1. So I wasn't going to question their judgment now. I remember walking into first watching it really concerned that there might be something that was different from the game because the game and the storyline of the game, it does make really bold choices and they've stuck to those choices. So I was expecting they would stick to the choices that they made in the game, but I know that sometimes adaptations can take really sharp, vivid turns, and I was a little apprehensive walking into it. I was genuinely nervous because I didn't want something to be not what I wanted it to be. But
Right.
I ended up adoring the episode. I thought the length of time was great. I thought that the story was really well captured. I think they successfully bookended, bookended, again, making up words on the pod. They bookended what? The the series so well, and there are so many parallels to the opening episode. There's so
Mm,
many parallels here between Joel and Ellie kind of reversing roles and the beginning being Joel's origin story, this starting with Ellie's origin story. There's just so much good stuff. And
mhm.
I loved it. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, like I kind of mirror everything you've just said there. Like for me, this is how you do a finale. And it was just beautiful. I was worried as well. Like we had that conversation when we said, like, 45 minutes for the finale, where other episodes have been longer. Like, really? But the way that they pull everything together, there's not a single minute wasted in those 45 minutes. And it's just beautifully done. And as well, like, you and I have known about the ending to the video game for a long time, right? Like, over 10 years ago, well, 10 years ago, actually, we were having this conversation as gamers about, oh my God, this ending. And it's still kind of sat so indifferently with people for many years. And people kind of still discuss that ending, especially going into it, like the second game as well. I just loved how faithful this was. I just love how much they captured the pure essence of that ending and like really I think the best stuff in kind of any form of media leaves you thinking about it afterwards. It still like resides in your mind. And we spoke about this with like episode 3 and stuff like that for very different reasons. But this episode in particular, with the thing that happens at the end and the choice, and that's the big thing about this episode in particular, probably above all others, is choice. And that choice that happens and choices that happen throughout this episode, but especially at the end, it's that conversation you have afterwards with your friends and with other people that watch when you're like, was that the right choice? And then you start to weigh up what else could have happened in that scenario. The best media in any shape or form, the best art does that. I think like leaves it something in your head to think about afterwards and just leaves you longing for that second season. It doesn't tie everything up in a nice bow. And that's exactly the way the game did it as well. And just, I mean, the performances in this episode, just beautiful. And as well, the main thing is this whole episode, we see one infected. That's it. And it just further emphasizes how important people are in The Last of Us. These human stories, the journeys we go on, how we evolve as people, especially in this post apocalyptic world, just beautifully handled. And I'm excited to jump in and talk about it.
Yeah, and the first game, much like I imagine the first season will be, is it is a storyline, but it is also expositional to the second game, which is a
Mm,
little bit more involved. And so I imagine they're going to introduce more of the infected in the second game. I know, even just particular scenes that come to mind in the beginning of the second game. I mean, there's
mm,
definitely more infected that are integrated into the narrative as opposed to more just props and obstacles you have to work through.
right.
Um, but yeah, I think that to begin this analysis, returning to what the title means, what does The Last of Us stand for? Is it the last of the people left on Earth, or is us a bit deeper? Is it the last of what is left of us on the inside?
Hmm.
We've captured these moments of I remember going back to episode 2, you referred to the world as a museum,
Hmm.
and that's what's left, and that is what was humanity. And so these little bits and pieces that these characters have carried with them is indicative of, I think, what the focal point of the narrative is, which is that the last of us is that which is left behind. LOL. That what is left behind within us.
Obviously, the result of that, of stripping everything away and getting to the core of who we are, and then how that informs the decisions that we make as well, and the choices that we make, especially in this episode, is incredibly important. And oh, I mean, when we get into it, yeah, let's do it. Let's dive in. So we open the episode the first time we ever do an opening before the credits, which is really interesting, a nice little stylistic touch as well. We open up on Anna running through the forest, which is Ashley Johnson, everybody, who is the original voice actress of Ellie, who is incredible. Like, as you said, as you alluded to earlier on, Joy, like the moment you hear her speak as Gamage, you're like, there's Ellie's voice. It was just brilliant. Like, so nice to include her. Both Troy Baker in the previous episode, and then we've got like Ashley Johnson here as well. Just fantastic. The choice of her as well, being pregnant and literally giving birth to Ellie is just genius. Like she gave birth to the character of Ellie in that voice. And then we have that as well here. Literally genius idea. But yeah, so she's running through the forest. She's obviously heavily pregnant. We can't see who's chasing her initially. We don't really know like where she is. And then when she gets out of like this forest, she then runs towards this, like looks like a barn. We see like there's a Firefly logo as well, spray painted on one of the side of the buildings. I have to say as well, this kind of barn setup, like this kind of farm setup, like this building that she's running to, is literally where Ellie lives with Dina in the second game. Like it
Yes.
is exactly the same.
The
Like
same.
the land outside, the way the building looks, like everything. It's that as well as just chef's kiss. Like with the finale, we're going to move on to the second one. We're introducing you to stuff that will be familiar again when we do season 2. But yeah, so she runs in, she kind of, she's all sweaty, she's out of breath, obviously like in pain from like contractions from everything that's happening with the pregnancy. Literally, that baby's coming. So then locks herself in a room. And I love as well, we get the introduction to the knife here straight away. So this is the knife. As soon as we see that knife, we know, oh, that's Ellie's knife. It's kind of straight away indicative of that's Ellie's mother. Like we know straight away that's how she got the knife. Obviously, that's how it's been passed on. And then this whole thing, this how scrappy it is, I love. Like we hear like this is horror movie stuff again. We hear obviously the infected brain on the door. We know somebody's coming in. She gets the knife out ready. She's like feeling the pain of the contractions. It's a horrendous situation. Horrendous. Obviously, the infected breaks in. There's like a bit of a scrap whilst on the floor, like literally defending her baby. And obviously, like stabs, very similar in the way that Ellie stabs as well, the infected with like a big, like roundhouse hook almost, and then stabs the infected in the side. Obviously, it falls over. And in the struggle, the baby is born. Like, literally, imagine, like, you've just been having a fight and then there's a baby below you. But yeah, this opening, Joy, like, what are your thoughts?
It was so emotional. It was so moving. Just hearing the original Ellie's voice is something. This game, for those of us who played the game, it really submerges the fan base. And we become so deeply entrenched in these characters and their storylines. And the show positions Joel as the main character. More or less, the game does as well, theoretically, in the beginning, because it's focused on him at the start. But Ellie is really the focal point of the storyline. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
she is the sun that the solar system revolves around here. And to hear her voice again after all this time associating Bella Ramsey's voice with Ellie and Bella Ramsey's character choices, which though similar are different, it was just so refreshing. It felt emotional to me. And to introduce such a heart gut wrenching moment, to tip the hat to Ashley Johnson and say, in this quick little bit, you're
Mm.
going to you're going to be the force that starts all of this. And I know this ties back into information we might have as gamers or fans of the storyline, in which a lot of Ashley Johnson's person, like her in real life, influenced the development of Ellie,
Hmm.
down to, which has been spoken about a lot, her love of space. So Ellie's love of space was a character choice designed by the real life voice actor. And as they were workshopping the game in real time, they became very connected to these characters. And so the characters themselves became influenced by the real life people, specifically Ashley Johnson. So to hear her voice again, so deeply moving, so deeply emotional. She is Ellie in some regard, and the metaphor of her giving birth to Ellie because she has, but also this idea of passing on, passing the torch, um,
Mm.
uh, transition, or that which is inherited, which I think is such an important theme in this episode. Maybe inherited traumas, but inherited storylines, inherited purpose. I think a lot of these things can be said both on and off camera.
Hmm.
And I also loved, I don't know if this is any bit correlative, but Anna as ANNA, vowel, consonant, consonant, vowel.
Mm.
Ellie, ELLIE, kind of a similar structure in the name of itself. Um, I thought that there were so many nice Easter eggs here with obviously all of the hidden storyline about how Marlene is connected to Ellie is revealed. The
Right.
knife, how the origin story of the blade, which has a moment, which is great.
Hmm.
And the best part of it all is she's singing Aha, The Sun Always Shines on TV,
Yes.
which is 80s, which means danger,
Yeah.
but also is just like what a nice title,
Hmm.
It's just such a nice title to conclude this through line. Obviously, for listeners who've been talking or listening to us talk about it, Aha and Take On Me are so integral to the show and have shown their Easter eggs throughout the season. So I just thought this whole bit was really moving, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was a beautiful opening. Like as you said, it was so emotional and like perfectly placed as well to come at the finale. Like, we could have had this like this opening, we could have had it earlier on, and it would have explained like the origins of Ellie. But I love that we get this at the finale. And there's a lot of metaphor here as well, a lot of imagery, like Ellie being like the savior baby. We have that in like so many stories, whether it be like, Moses like found in the basket and like then goes on to like, save people, or we've got like even like, taking it in a more modern context, and you've got like Superman is the baby that arrives on Earth and is found. Like it's interesting imagery again we get here, and like Ellie is that. Ellie is the potential savior who can then save the rest of the people. Obviously, we kind of get that as well with the fact that Anna's leg is bitten at the same time that she gives birth to Ellie, so she knows she's going to die. But then the complications of, oh my god, what will that do to my baby? Which is really interesting. She kind of says, "Look, I cut the umbilical cord before. Like she's fine, she's fine." But I love that you referenced Sun Always Shines on TV by Aha. Incredible song. Really interesting as well if you watch that music video, like it's about a man who wants to be with a woman, but he's actually transforming into something else. And we kind of look about that transformation is always a big theme all the way through The Last of Us as well, whether it be the cordyceps and the effect that it has on your body, or whether it's you transforming, going on a personal journey, like Joel is transformed into another person by the end of this like whole show as well, in his journey, which was really interesting. But also Sun Always Shines on TV is like almost like a reference to the very last part of the episode, like these Hollywood endings, you have always have the sun shining on TV, these happy endings where things get wrapped up really nicely. And that's not what we get here. Like that's in TV. This is reality. This is what really is going to happen. I thought that was a nice little through line of the song. And I love her singing it as well, because we know like Ashley Johnson sings Aha as Ellie, and in the second game as well, and beautifully. So I love that. Just all of these little references. It's just all like the crumbs of something amazing. It's like crumbs,
Absolutely.
but to us, it's a meal. Like every crumb is a meal.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
I want to add too, I loved what you just said about Moses,
Mm.
which makes me think of Jesus being born in a manger, which is so similar to kind of this like post-apocalyptic manger. And to go back to what you said about the reference to this house, this barn, this
Mm.
farmhouse being what Ellie and Dina live in the second game, which is referenced by Joel here, in this season when he talks about wanting to be the
Mm,
shepherd, if you will, and
yes.
live on his farm, which goes back to the idea of Jesus, a savior, which is Ellie. And I also love that, Ashley Johnson and Pedro Pascal are mom and dad. And
Yeah.
this is their home. This is their place. Um, I really I love I just and everything, the subtleties, they're making more and more sense.
Yeah, no, 100%. This, as I say, like when I said earlier, like this is the way that you do a finale. It is literally taking all of these threads and just tying them all back together with like everything you've seen already in the show. It's just wonderfully done. Honestly, such a payoff. It's so strong. Oh, and we'll keep highlighting stuff like this all the way through. So I know, obviously, as we've alluded, like Marlene comes into the building, obviously, head of the Firefly. She has two guards with her, goes upstairs, and then finds Anna, obviously, like with the baby. She's singing the song to her, and she even says, like, she sees the bite on her leg. She's like, look, she was delivered like everything before, like before that. She then says to Marlene, can you take her to Boston? Obviously, gives her the knife as well, says, give this to her, talks about her name as well. I love when the baby's crying. She says, like, yeah, like, yeah, you fucking tell him, Ellie. Like straight away, it's like Ellie's a potty mouth as well. And I like that it's her own mother that says that to her as well as a baby. I just love that kind of reference as well. But obviously, as you said, Joe, we've got this big connection here to like, right, Marlene, when she kind of spoke about knowing Ellie, like, she's the one that brought her to the QZ and everything. We've got this full explanation now of how that happened. And I love that so much. Obviously, she then passes the baby on to Marlene. Then she says, look, you're going to have to kill me. Can you kill me? And she's like, no. And initially she says, like, I can't kill you. I'm sorry. And takes the baby and walks out. And again, this is just such a gut punch, like when she hands the baby over, she's looking at the baby, she hands it over to the other guy that's with her. And then when she just says, cover her ears, and then has to like almost psych herself up to then go in and just like, it's just 1, 2, 3, gun, bang. Any slower than that, she would have talked herself out of it, right? It's just psyching yourself up. And sometimes you have to do that, right? When you, not obviously when you're doing something of this caliber, but like when you try to do something, like you try to psych yourself up, it is just right. I know this has to be done. It's a horrendous. I don't want to have to shoot my friend, but what will happen to her if we leave her? Yeah, it was just such a strong emotional opening. It ties so many things together, ties the characters together and everything like that, but just really gives us the essence of, oh my God, this journey that Ellie has been on as well, from being a baby born in this world to where she is now, which is obviously when it cuts to present day as well, but just beautifully done, right?
Yeah, I think it was really important the words that Anna uses to speak to Marlene when she says find someone to take care of
Mm,
her, which is interesting because you'd think like this is your best friend, you would say take care of her. Like
yeah.
I'm giving you this task. But I thought it was such a nice literary way to create the concept of fate
Mm-hmm.
because Marlene does find someone. She just doesn't realize who it is.
Yeah.
And it's Joel.
Mm-hmm.
And we have Anna here, like I said, Ashley Johnson, Pedro Pascal, mom and dad. We have
Mm-hmm.
Anna here who is lying to Marlene saying, I cut the cord before I got bit. She wants to do anything to protect Ellie. She
Yeah.
wants to find someone, in best case scenario, she finds someone with the same instincts, someone who wants to protect Ellie at all cost as well.
Mm-hmm.
And Marlene, who is tasked with finding someone, I mean, she accomplishes her goal. Marlene is essentially, in some perspective, betraying her best friend by
Mm.
giving Ellie to sacrifice for the cure. But ultimately, she fulfills her promise because she gives her to Joel, who doesn't allow that to happen. And similar to Anna, who is saying, I will do anything to protect this child. Joel says the same and acts accordingly, which I thought was really interesting. That was a very intentional choice of words to say find someone.
Yeah. And like the way that she like pauses when she says that, and the camera is very close on her face as she says it as well. It is that absolute link to Joel. And you're right. Yeah. It's beautifully done. It's very intentional, and you can just see that on her face, like as she says it and as she looks at her, find someone to look after her. Do not let her die, and it's, again, it was just wonderfully done that it pulls us into modern day when we see, baby Ellie then cuts to current Ellie, and she has this someone who has been looking after her. Obviously, we start off here like Ellie's basically still suffering from the trauma of like the last episode. She's very much still in shock. The whole world is very muffled and different around her now, where before, this optimistic girl who, wanted to help people and had like almost like a hero complex as well, has now had to do probably one of the most hardest things in her entire life, where she's had to fight off a predator from basically trying to sexually assault her, but then also not just kill him, but butcher him. Right. And like all of this is going to weigh on her, and it massively does here. I love, like, again, as we said, like the muffled sound, like when Joel's trying to shout at her and she just can't hear because she's just so in her own world, like reflecting on everything. And as well, like Joel here, like, he's shouting at her, he's trying to show her like old world stuff that he knows that she loves, like, there's the boggle and everything like that. And, talks about like the tin of food that they had way back in another episode as well, like the ravioli, which was really nice. But Ellie's just very disassociated in this. And rightfully so. I mean, she went through hell in the last episode. That was Ellie's episode. There was a lot emotionally for like a teenager to have to, the burden that she had to bear there. And just beautifully played here by Bella Ramsey, just like very kind of just solemn, just looking down, disassociating, kind of hearing what Joel's saying, but also not hearing what Joel's saying at the same time. It was just wonderful. Like this little performance here, which then goes on, just fantastic, right?
We see Bella Ramsey really internalizing the story of Ellie so far. Ellie is synthesizing choice.
Yeah.
Ellie is synthesizing power. Ellie is synthesizing agency and contextualizing what these things actually mean when you have them. Because throughout her entire story, Ellie wants all of those things. She wants to have choice, have agency, have power. She doesn't want to be a victim. And now that she has it, now that she has, most importantly, power, it's taken such a toll on her. And it's so interesting that we're introduced to a brand new Joel and Ellie. When we meet them in episode 1, maybe explored a little bit more in episode 2, Ellie is eager. She's very daughter-like. She's very young. She is seeking that validation and that approval. She's light in spirit. And Joel is completely hardened. He's very isolated. He's very self-centered. I don't mean that in a conventional insulting sense. I just mean that his thoughts and his choices are very centered around the self. And now we see that the complete 180 of both characters. Ellie was daughter-like, youthful. Joel is now father-like. He is seeking her validation, trying to get in and understand why she is isolating herself. And Ellie is, as Joel was, shut off, isolated, and very centered around the self. And it's just very interesting that they intentionally crafted this character transformation. There's so much mirroring. Going back to episode 1, they're in house number 11. The intro has the 2 lines next to each other. There are 2 character groups in every single episode. Everybody comes in pairs of 2, and these characters mirror each other in such nice parallel line type formats. And Ellie and Joel are those mirrors, have become those mirrors to each other to such an extent that they've reversed roles, which I just think is so interesting.
Yeah, beautifully done. Like, even like the way that Joel now is talking to Ellie is like completely different from the Joel who was like so done with this world, so over everything, so like, everything is terrible, everything is shit, I want nothing to do with this, let's not talk about it. And now he's literally cheering up his daughter that he sees. He's making her feel better. The Joel that we got in season 1 was not that Joel. Sorry, episode 1, we did not have that Joel. Like Joel was very kind of cynical is the word about everything. And now he's like, oh, look at this, you used to love this, you used to like this. And he's like really trying to perk her up in the way that a father would with a daughter. And, as you said, like it's just complete 180 compared to what we had before. And it's really wonderfully done. So obviously then they get their guns and then they decide to head out. They talk about obviously going to the hospital. It's this way. And then they start on their journey. I love as well that in this conversation, Joel references, oh, I saw a guitar in that RV. Maybe one day I'll be able to teach you that. Beautiful reference again, because we know that literally happens in the game. And it's wonderful as well. It's Joel thinking about a future, right? Thinking about like they will be together still. Like after this, whatever happens, like they will stay together. And I just love that as well. And I love that we get that payoff, like, in the second game, which hopefully we will get that magical scene in the TV show that we spoke about as well, the AHA performance. It just wonderfully ties this together. And I imagine with the writing as well of something of this caliber, we will get a lot of callbacks to this season when we watch season 2 as well, which will be so fun. And then just the point here when they're walking along and Joel's like, okay, here's what we'll do. And then Ellie straight away is like, look, we'll cut through a building, look around, we'll go up a skyscraper, look around. Is that what we're going to do? And he's like, actually, no, there was some dynamite I found there. We're going to blow up this rubble. And she's like, really? No. Yeah, what we're going to do is we're going to go inside that building, go up, and just literally repeats what they're going to do because it's what they've done before, right? This is what we saw in Kansas City. It's what they've been doing. It's repetition. They get it. But it's very personable. It's what I was saying before about Joel. It's very fatherly here. He's like, there's a smile at the end of every sentence as he's talking to her now. And for a long time, that wasn't there. For a long time, remember, she was cargo. She was somebody that he needed to take from one place to another. Whereas now, it's a daughter figure. Like, I love my time with you. And it's always on the tip of his lips, like to say, like, you are now like my purpose. And I'll talk about purpose a little bit later on. But yeah, just that dynamic with Joel here, like they're laughing, they're having fun together. He's trying to perk her up and lift her up. And it's just wonderfully done.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a stretch, but my brain connects things sometimes, and sometimes they make sense, and sometimes they seem completely contrived. But I thought it was interesting that in the opening scene, Anna specifically says that she was afraid to nurse Ellie. And it brings me to this idea of nurturing and what nurturing means, and how Joel's role until now has been very nurturing, but it's been nurturing for the sake of survival. He's teaching Ellie how to survive. But for the first time, he's seeking to nurture a different relationship with Ellie. There's more of an emotional prioritization. And it isn't so much about the survivability. And I don't know if that's just partly because Ellie has established that she knows what she's doing, and this dialogue is proof of that, or if it's that Joel has been completely cracked open, and so it's less of a focus for him, and being that emotionally centered person is more of a focus for him. But I find it interesting that he can't nurture Ellie in the way that a parent would anymore. So because he's not providing her with the nurturing that she needs in this moment, she's shut off to him. And she hasn't been shut off until this point. She's been very receptive. That's why she is so capable. And so I just find it interesting, the idea of nurturing. One of the, overarching themes aside from inherited trauma that I was toying with was this idea of parentage, the idea of a mother and a father, and like what these roles mean, and how that role becomes metaphoric more so than just literal. And I think this is maybe a little bit of an exploration with that. But this all ties back into that conversation at breakfast in episode 1, in which love and dependency are two sides of this conversation. And so this is more of like authentic love. Joel's expressing genuine love, and Ellie's shut off to it because the love that they've shared up until this point has been that of dependency. It's been that of survival. So I just think it's an interesting shift. It's a very vivid shift, but an interesting one.
Yeah, definitely. 100%. And then, they enter the building, and obviously Joel checks around. I like that he takes a second to check in on Ellie as well. Kind of, he realizes that the fruits of his labor, as you've hinted towards, Joey, are not working. And he just says to her flat out, look, like, are you okay? Like, you've been more quiet than usual. And she kind of just shrugs it off and says, yeah, I'm fine. And he knows that she's not fine, but that's her kind of shutting that down. I'll just leave her to it. And then, obviously boosts Ellie up, like says, look, we'll go up to higher ground. We'll have a look around. Obviously, she's then going to go and pass a ladder down, but then she sees something and runs off. Like the ladder just kind of falls down on Joel. And then obviously he does climb up. She gets distracted by something, so he's running after Ellie. This takes us to one of my favorite scenes of anything ever. Like video game, TV, this is just beautiful. What happens, Joey?
I think we've all been waiting for this moment. And at first I was like, what is she doing dropping the ladder? Like, girl, get your shit together. And then I was like, okay. We've been waiting. But they see a giraffe, and I assume I don't remember exactly if they speak about it, but a zoo or something must have let them out into the open, or they escaped or something. And they begin feeding the giraffe leaves, and I think most fun part of this is that to learn that the giraffe was real, that they were
Yeah.
working with.
Yes.
Um, and it seemed it was a bit of CGI paired with the actual giraffe, but they showed footage and pictures behind the scene with the giraffe, and so interesting. But I wrote down for this small moment, big integrity.
Yeah.
And I think this is how you adapt a video game to screen,
Hmm.
because the relationship that we gamers have with gaming, it's so immersive, and it's three-dimensionally immersive. We
Mm.
become absorbed in the storyline. We become the muscle memory in our hands to play, the characters' motions and the weaponry, and but there's also this kind of like cult relationship we develop with these specific moments that we fall in love with. And to
Mm.
honor the fan base so much that they would not only put this in the show, but create a true, real reaction from Bella Ramsey and Pedro Pascal with feeding a real giraffe. I mean, it was exquisite. It was so nice.
Absolutely beautiful. Like as you said, like the fact that they didn't like use like CGI giraffes, they actually used real giraffes is just incredible choice. Like obviously to give like Bella Ramsey and Pedro Pascal like something to act off, but as well just for us as the viewer to see that. As you said, Joey, like as gamers, when we see that, we see those giraffes and go, oh my God, wow. And it's like this breath of like relief. Like we've seen a creature now, we've seen so many creatures all the way through this game of like fear, they're deadly, you must run. And for the first time, we see them see this creature and just relax and just smile. And it's beautiful. Obviously, it's very much like life finds a way. Like where they are, like, you see the buildings, the dilapidated buildings in the background. You see everything's overgrown. It's very Chernobyl. It's very beautiful. And you just see these giraffes just confidently like living their life and just walking out. It's almost like a glimpse of like the world rebuilding itself. Like life is rebuilding itself. Life finds that way. And it's beautiful metaphors as well of like Ellie looking, can I be like the person that helps life find its way again for people? Can I bring this back? And just the acting here is incredible. Like again, Bella Ramsey like taking the leaves, feeding it to the giraffe, and like Bella Ramsey's laugh and the smile as well is just wonderful. It's like pulling the Ellie character out of the trauma. Like the clouds are starting to disperse now, and Ellie's really kind of seeing life, and just it pulls her back into reality. So in such a sense. But when
Yeah.
Pedro Pascal looks at her and he just smiles, that smile says so much. That smile almost says like, I can't let her go. She can't die. She is my daughter. That smile says so much without saying anything. And that moment alone, if you just pause that and just look at Pedro Pascal and obviously Bella Ramsey, their smiles are just, they say everything. It's beautiful. It's honestly beautiful.
Yeah, it was exquisite. I mean, and by maintaining the integrity of having that real giraffe and
Mm,
kind of teetering the line of maybe they're not acting a bit,
yeah.
maybe this is
Yeah.
genuinely how they feel. Like, I mean, imagine feeding a giraffe. I mean, they do that at zoos, but they are in an isolated space. They're eye level. It's just
Mm,
it's a really cool experience. And I think that the directors were able to kind of capture the most authentic version of that experience by recruiting a real giraffe, which is I just thought it was so cool, because like
mm,
obviously it's not an easy thing to do, even to get a space to be able to film in a space that could house a giraffe.
right.
It's just a very interesting way to do this. And again, I wrote down small moment, big integrity. I thought that this was so lovely. And another really sweet thing that I saw afterward on the internet, one of the game developers, as an Easter egg, wrote on the scoreboard of the whatever might have been a football field, he wrote his wife's name, Bethany Claire
Nice.
Field, and he put that in the game. And then whoever adapted it onto screen kept the name of the scoreboard and the name of the field. So this game developer who put his wife into the game actually had his wife's name on the TV show, which I thought was really sweet.
Oh my God, I did not know that. That's
Mm.
incredible. Oh man, that
Yeah.
just shows you like the level of detail that this show's gone into. That's fantastic. I love that detail. I did not know that. That's beautiful. I've been in a privileged position in my life where I've been able to feed giraffes in a zoo. And it was giraffes I love anyway. I think they're beautiful creatures. I think they're so just ethereal in this interesting way as well when you watch them move. And it's
Mhm.
just they're stunning. And I remember I can't even remember where I was. I was abroad somewhere, but like they give us like bags of food and we could just I was Fuerteventura, that's where I was. And they give us these bags of food and it was like chunks of carrots and literally and like they just said, oh, just go and feed the animals. And then the giraffe's heads just came down to me, and I was like, "Oh my god!" And just get, like, I had the same silly joy that like Ellie has in this, just like laughing as I was giving this giraffe food. It was a beautiful moment, and like it just captured here so wonderful. It's just incredible. Like honestly, this was the scene you and I talked about like way back in earlier episodes when we saw the little toy giraffe, that little Easter egg of "It's coming, don't worry, it's coming." We get the payoff, and the payoff is beautiful, just
Yeah.
incredible.
And I want to add one more bit to tie back into the concept of the show and the
Mm.
idea of like what is the last of us.
Hmm.
I recently, I think it was when we watched the episode, I had the conversation with Corvix, my partner, for those who don't know him. We were listening and or watching, and he said it's so interesting that giraffes are like they're kind of like real life dinosaurs.
Yeah.
And it took me back to this idea of the last of us and what we return to, what is left of us. And
Mm.
it is this idea of nature. It's the idea of human nature, innate nature. It's leaves and vines billowing into buildings. It's giraffes running free. And but the idea that the giraffe itself may, to some, represent this historical vantage point into Earth's history and how society is this constructed version of what the edifice of Earth should be or can be. And so it's interesting at this idea as we are kind of when we trim the fat of the world and everything is left to its core, and what is left, what is the last of it, it is this idea of nature and nature connection. So I just wanted to
Mm.
add that because I thought it was such a nice intentional choice, even when they developed the game to put a giraffe here.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, like two things as well. Like Ellie obviously has a big interest in dinosaurs. We see that in the second game as well. Like as we mentioned before, putting the fedora on different dinosaurs' hats, which again is just incredible. Great character building all the way through that as well. But I mean, as well, you think about like dinosaurs were wiped out by something as well. Like the meteor coming down, wiping down dinosaurs, and that was a big reset. And this is almost like a reset as well that we're seeing now as well after there's been such a
Mm.
big wipeout of people. So such an
And
interesting.
she makes the meteor joke too in the pun book.
Yeah, exactly. So such an interesting tie to bring this together. So who knows? But yeah, nice call there, Joy. I like that. So then obviously they go a little bit higher, then they see like it's not just one giraffe, they see all the giraffes on the field, right? Like walking. Obviously, we see the football sign as well, which I love that, Joy. And I love that she says, you can't deny that view. A nice pull back to episode 2. She kind of says that to Joel, like with Tess is like just climbed down the ladder. They're looking out and says, oh, you can't deny that view. Love that they brought that back as well. Now, this is the really interesting conversation that they have here. And this is what I meant about this brings it back to meaning and purpose. So Joel almost gives her an out, right? He like says, like, look, we don't have to do this. Like we can go back to Tommy's and we can just forget the whole thing. And then Ellie says these words here, which are so important. She says, after all I've been through, after all I've done, it can't just be for nothing. And that there, right there, that line can't just be for nothing. That's meaning, that's purpose. That's what we've seen all the way through this show. Like Joel, like his purpose initially was his daughter. Once she was taken from him, as we get the conversation later on, he tried to end his life. He thought that he had no purpose anymore. He had no meaning in this life, And then the conversation, which we'll get to, that they have later on in the army camp, Joel reveals his new purpose. But think about other characters that we've had all the way through this show. Like even Tess says, like, Joel, this could be our reset. This can be our new purpose. You've got to save Ellie. You've got to take her. This can like forgive all of the shit that we've been through. That would like she became Tessa's purpose in that moment before she died. Look at Kathleen. Her meaning, her purpose was revenge. She wanted revenge. She needed to get Henry to get her revenge. That was her purpose and that was her meaning, to rally the troops to do that. Look at Henry and Sam. His purpose, very similar to Joel, but was this younger child, but was his brother, looking after his brother. Like he made a horrendous decision, right? Killing like that leader, but to get the medicine to help his brother. Similar parallels of something that's going to happen later on in this episode. All of these characters, like, look at Marlene as well, like the Fireflies, the Resistance, all of these characters have purpose. And this is Ellie here saying, look, this is my purpose now. Everything we've done, it can't be for nothing. This is meaning. This is my meaning. I need to do this.
And also, we spoke about this a little bit last episode, but how Jackson is a positive representation of what community can become. As
Mm-hmm.
their focal point, their focus is the community, the whole. And in every example that a character makes a decision based on a singular person or makes a decision of their own volition to serve themselves, like Kathleen, even Henry and Sam to some point,
Mm-hmm.
and the leader of the religious cult that we saw last episode,
Yeah.
these become dysfunctional representations of what society can become.
Right.
And unfortunately, Joel, there is a bit of a conversation about did Joel do the right thing at the end of this episode, but he makes an individual choice based on his interest and not the interest of the community or of the whole. And like obviously it's going to create dysfunction instead of the opportunity for a functioning collective, which the only example we've seen of that so far is Jackson.
Again, like as the conversation carries on as well, when she says like, after we're done, we'll go to Tommy's, we'll get that sheep ranch on the moon, and like there's all these nice references back to everything that they've spoken about before, of like what they want to do after the world rebuilds itself, right? Joel, as you said, like talks about being on the ranch with sheep, and Ellie again, this love of like the interest in like space and like going on the moon and everything like that, and it nicely will tie into things that we'll see in season 2 as well. And it's just, again, it's looking at the future. It's talking about that future of them two still being together. Because as far as they're aware, it's just going to be a blood thing. They'll take some of Ellie's blood and then that'll be it. Like they'll work on it, they'll distribute it, they'll create the vaccine and everything will be fine. Obviously, we find out as the episode goes on, that is not the case. But again, she says, there's no halfways. We finish what we started. And I love that she says as well, I'll follow you anywhere you go. And that's almost like Joel, like being reassured, right? She's not going to leave me when this is over. She's reassuring me that once she's gone, this is finished. They've got her blood. They can create the vaccine. We will still be together as this father-daughter figure. And I just love that. Again, like it's her reassurance in Joel. Joel is the one who will protect her. Joel is the one who is her father figure now. Her belief in everything is in Joel, but also in this cause. And I just love that. Yeah, so then obviously they carry on. They then walk through to the army camp. Again, this is all literally like kind of beat for beat from the game, to be fair. They go out into this army camp. Like, obviously, Ellie's asking about it, and he's like, oh, I was taken here once. And then she's like, oh, from that gunshot wound from like the person, obviously. And this is when Joel reveals to her for the first time, the gunshot wound. And he says to her, look, the person that flinched, it wasn't the person shooting at me, it was me. I flinched because I tried to kill myself. And this is when he explains, look, like when Sarah died, again, kind of what I alluded to before, I had no purpose anymore. I pulled the trigger, but I flinched. And then these next lines here, oh my God. He says, like, I don't know why I'm telling you all of this. And then Ellie just says, I know. And then there's a beat. And then she says, time heals all wounds, I guess. And then Joel says, it wasn't time that did it. And it's just looking at her. This for me is perfect writing. This is what, if I ever write scripts or stories or anything, show, don't tell. This is show, don't tell. Like everything is in those lines there. Joel's basically saying to her, like in that line, it wasn't time that did it. He's basically saying, I love you. Like, I love you as a daughter. That's what he's saying. The way he looks at her, the way she looks back at him, the way they're understanding each other without kind of just verbalizing. It's just beautiful. And like the fact that Joel gets emotional as well, he knows like how much like he's showing how much Ellie means to him now. She is no longer cargo. She's no longer this person that he doesn't know. For all that he sees, this is his daughter now. He's got like a daughter again. And that was just beautiful. The acting here is incredible. Just wonderful.
Yeah, and I love the focus on time. It's something that was really explored in the first episode that is alluded to, or at least creates a metaphor for the idea of the world standing still. But there is this really big focus on a broken watch. And so the idea of time and being broken, and how Joel specifically says it wasn't time that did it. So I thought that was a nice way to kind of bookend that 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 metaphor.
Yeah, it was just gorgeous. And like the acting was amazing, right? Like
It
Pedro
was great.
Pascal, the way he's looking, just wonderful. Yeah. And then what happens next, Joey, after they set off?
They are exploring the pun book,
Love
making
this.
apocalyptic jokes, meteor jokes. I loved the joke about the what did the green grape say to the purple grape?
Yeah, just
So
breathe.
funny. Yeah.
Yeah.
But they are a smoke bomb, flash smoke bomb is thrown at them by the Fireflies. They are captured, and Joel wakes up in a hospital room with Marlene, who basically gives him the rundown about what is the nature of what's going on,
Yeah.
and that it kind of gives us the backstory, this like fan backstory to the cordyceps virus and why Ellie's immune. And she says that they, the doctor believes that they the cordyceps have grown in her since birth, and that they produce a chemical messenger that makes normal cordyceps think that she's a cordyceps, or the head cordyceps, if you will,
Mm.
and that they want to remove it from her and multiply it in a lab and produce those chemical messengers to give other people so that they can equally become immune. And Joel pieces together, oh, that means you're going to take this out of her brain.
Mm.
And we've established up until this point so many times, especially earlier on, that Joel thinks being a hero, being a savior, being a superhero, like he talks about his brother, is phooey. He thinks it's silly. And he also alludes to the Fireflies and their missions as being essentially a fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
So his immediate reaction, aside from just the idea that Ellie is going to lose her life, which he won't obviously allow, he is also meeting that with the idea that you guys are just, you're living some fairy tale dream, and you're going to kill someone I care about to make it happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also like the fact that it's all on maybes for Joel. He's like, there's no guarantee. Like this is a maybe. They're just trialing something. And all the way through kind of this as well, he's had moments with Ellie where he's seen the world rebuilding itself. You know, like after that giraffe scene, the first thing he says is, look, we don't have to do this. We can head back right now. We can go and live our lives in Jackson, because he's seen the way Jackson's working. And he's seen like this beautiful reference of these giraffes, like almost like the world taking, like rebuilding itself again. It's this sense of like, we are coming back to like healing ourselves, and he gives her that out. And then obviously this, as you said, he puts two and two together straight away when he says like cordyceps grows inside the brain. And Marlene says it does. And then there'll be no pain. She's kind of saying, look, there's no other choice here. Like, and he's saying, actually, there is. This further emphasizes like everything's starting to come together in Joel's head now. And we're going to get this big decision of, oh my God, like, we've got two paths we can go down. And even Marlene says, look, the guards are going to escort you out. Here's Ellie's knife. This is going to happen to her. And the choice has been taken out of Ellie's hands to a degree here. For all that Ellie, thought it was going to be like to do with her blood, right? We see her rubbing like her blood on like Sam as well, like in that episode. Obviously, it didn't work, but still, there's this everything working from the blood, right? And then after this, look, take some of my blood, we'll be good to go. We can live the rest of our lives. Ellie, as soon as she was captured, was held under, knocked out, put on that operating table. It's like, yep, we're going to basically cut open your head. And that choice has been taken away from her. These are two people now who are making kind of like choices on their own merits, on their own beliefs of what is the right thing to do. I thought that was really interesting how Ellie talks all about like doing this for the greater good, how choice is so important. And then that's whipped away from her completely. Like she's powerless in that sense. Marlene obviously has Joel escorted, or tried to be escorted out of the building. I like as well, like as he's kind of like walking out, he's looking like at the kind of the hospital maps of like the different levels of where things are, taking note of them straight away as like the soldiers are pushing him out. Obviously, then they get to the stairs. Joel has a scrap with the guards, like obviously takes the gun off them, kills them both. And then this is just the hospital shootout. This is like a massacre. Obviously, in the video game, you play all of this. But I liked how they undercut this with this really kind of sad music playing in the background. Like everything was kind of muffled again. Like the sound was a little bit muffled. And like you see Joel just wandering through the corridor, like just taking people out. And again, like that sad music, it's referencing like, look, this is happening, but is this the right thing that should be happening? Like, is this a heroic moment for Joel? Can we get behind what he's about to do? He's massacring these people who are trying to do something for what they believe could be the greater good to help so many people. And yet we love Joel. We've been behind Joel all the way through this. We know he's going to go and rescue Ellie. But is that the right thing? And it's beautiful. That slow kind of lingering, that wandering towards this final decision. It was just, yeah, it was really, really nicely done with that slower pace and that nice kind of saddened music to really kind of undercut the whole scene.
And it's also, I mean, we're viewing it from people who have already played through that storyline, but I'm
Right.
sure a lot of the viewers seeing this for the first time are wondering, is Ellie already being operated on?
Yeah.
Is he going to get there in time? And I think that his urgency is paired with that as well. I love
Mm.
that when he gets to the surgical room, he has to walk through the pediatric center. And one of the themes that is deeply explored throughout the show is Ellie's loss of innocence.
Yes.
And there are specific spatial allusions to what is very similar to this pediatric space with paintings on the walls. It feels very similar to the classroom in Kansas City that's underground,
Right.
which they spend some isolated time there. And that episode is certainly the a big plot point in Ellie's journey of the decomposition of innocence.
Mm.
So I think it's interesting that we walk through and see this very decorative, childish space, this innocent space,
Mm.
and that this is gonna obviously conclude that story because innocence is gone from Ellie completely. But obviously, innocence is paired with hope. Innocence is paired with um, promise or naivety. There's a lot of things that are not going to be present anymore once this experience is over.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And then we've got somebody as well, like who is so much younger and so innocent, yet is going to have potentially the biggest impact on the world going forward until that doesn't happen. So Joel obviously enters the room, enters the surgery, like Ellie's laying down on the, unconscious. And then obviously, he says like unhook her straight away. And the doctor's like takes the scalpel and says, look, like I can't let you take her. Shoots the doctor, says to the nurses, unhook her. One of the nurses is played by Laura Bailey, who is obviously the actress who voiced Abby in the second game. I won't go into spoiler territory, but I think putting her here in this particular moment plays so heavily into an Easter egg going into the second game. I don't want to ruin that for people, but a really smart choice by the people obviously behind this. Really, really clever. And obviously, when it comes to season 2, or if you play the second game, you will see what we're talking about there. Brilliantly done. Obviously, then Joel like takes Ellie. She's still obviously unconscious. She has a lot of drugs in her. Carries her down to the basement, just in the same way that he carried Sarah in like episode 1. It's that father figure carrying his daughter, protecting her, taking her away from harm. He obviously then goes down into the basement and then bumps into Marlene. Now, Marlene's obviously there and has him at gunpoint. And then what's the conversation that they have, Joey?
Marlene tries obviously to convince him that Ellie is going to be at risk in this world, and he still has a choice.
Mm-hmm.
He can give Ellie to Marlene, and even though he's done a lot of damage, there's still a chance that Ellie can be the cure. And so they start talking deeply about this idea of choice. And Marlene says, I know this is what Ellie would want.
Mm.
And Joel says that she hasn't been given a choice. And they're kind of both right
Yeah.
because as you explored, Ellie hasn't been given this exact choice. She hasn't been told that the consequences of this action will be death. But she does make it very clear, as Marlene says, that she wants to see this to the very end.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously, he makes the choice for her.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love like the lines here from Marlene when she says, like, it's not too late, even after all you've done. Like, we can still find a way. It's still like that sense of hope. And that's her kind of showing her purpose. Like, I need this, like, we need this, we need to repair the world. And she says, like because she lives in a broken world that you could have saved, like that's why we've got to do this. We've got to repair this broken world. And yet they're coming from different places, as I said earlier. Like Joel's had these experiences with Ellie where he's seen the world repairing itself. And yet Marlene still sees it as completely broken. Ellie's the only way to repair the world. It's such an interesting way how they're both coming at it from different points, from very different experiences. Even though they're both very hardened by this world, Ellie has, in a sense, cured Joel. hold him back to the person that he used to be when he was with Sarah, you know, and yet Marlene's saying, no, no, like that cure that has to go to the rest of the world. And it's interesting when you talk about this, like the show, and like Craig Mazin even alluded to this when he said you talk to different people about the show, the ending, about what Joel did and whether it was right or wrong. If you ask a parent what they would do, they're 100% all in. Yep, I would go and get my child. You know, I would go down to hospital as well. I'd go and get my child. You ask other people that don't have children, it's like, no, no, he did the wrong thing. You're like, you know, it was completely the wrong choice. It's just interesting that it's our experiences and our connections to people and what they mean to us delivers on that and how we, you know, make our decisions, right? Ellie was never Marlene's child, and she was very quick to pass her off to somebody else because that's what she was asked to do. Find someone to look after her. She didn't have that connection in the way that Joel has to her, even though she's known her for a longer time. But yeah, Joel has become her father now, her protector, and she is, by all, you know, means, Ellie is now his daughter. Of course he's going to protect her and go all out. And I think that's the point here of this. It's where we can look at this whole thing, this whole decision from different experiences based on what we've lived through and the connections we have with people like this in our lives.
It's also interesting that they're kind of the adopted parents
Mm,
of Ellie, and they both inherit Ellie, and they both are responsible for Ellie from parental vantage points, one maternal, one paternal.
right.
And obviously, Joel is a father, and Marlene is not a mother.
Yeah.
And so that definitely instructs their choices here.
Hmm.
And I think maybe as Marlene's best friend, Anna, Ellie's mom, knows that Marlene doesn't have those parental instincts. And that's why she says, find someone
Right.
to take care of Ellie.
Hmm.
And I think that what ends up happening is definitely within the best wishes of Anna, what Anna would have wanted as Ellie's actual parent.
Right.
So it's interesting to bring that full circle. The
Mm,
opening of the episode is Ellie being passed on to someone else. And then the closing of the episode is Ellie being passed on to someone else.
right.
So it is quite interesting. I don't know if pediatric floors, I imagine they don't, but I don't know if they house newborn babies. I imagine they don't, but I think it would be this idea that like Ellie is just taken out of the place of the hospital where she would have been born, the same
Right.
way that she is born in the beginning of the episode, and she's transitioned into um,
Mm,
unconsciously or unconscious to the circumstances, unconscious to the trauma that unfolded while she wasn't mentally alert. Um,
mm,
the same way, obviously, that goes on in the beginning with Anna and the clicker. Um, there's just mirrors here, and this show, every single episode brings in these mirrors, especially when it kind of, we talked about it more in the beginning, but these episodes are kind of split in halves, and the
yeah.
first half in some shape mirrors the second half. And so I'm seeing that same kind of mirroring here, which I think is quite brilliant.
Yeah. And, you know, lovely imagery that you point out there as well, Joey. Like it always kind of brings it back full circle. And I think that's what is one of the great strengths of this show is like all of these threads kind of become connected to things that you've seen before. They kind of, you know, put things out there and then like everything kind of comes back full circle. Hello, Lost. Could you not have done that sometimes? But yeah, but I love that. It's just clever writing, you know, and just the foreplanning. I know that the blueprint was obviously there with the game, but the way that they were able to lift it and elevate it in places as well is just incredible. And still connecting the writing like this is fantastic. So then obviously Joel, like, you know, it then cuts to Joel driving in the car. Okay, so then he's driving along. Ellie's waking up in the back of the car, still obviously quite heavily medicated, you know, and then Joel straight away is lying to her. You know, he's lying to her. He says like lots of people, they found lots of people who were immune like you. The doctors couldn't make it work. They stopped looking for a cure. And then straight away she says, all right, were people hurt? And just that look on Joel's face as he takes a breath and then says, yes. And then obviously we see that he was the one that shot Marlene as well. And then, you know, she says, is Marlene okay? And there's just silence from him, you know? And it's just, oh, it's like, it's a really like heavy scene, but beautifully played by the actors again. Like the intentions of him thinking back of like, God, everything that I've actually done here, to rescue Ellie. Like, I've taken out Marlene, who's like, the leader of the Firefly Resistance. And then straight away, he's just like, look, I'm taking you home. I'm sorry. Think about like Kathleen's words as well when she was talking to Henry, when she was like, children die, Henry. The world doesn't revolve around Sam. And it's so interesting that's reflected back here. You could say that again to Joel in some degree. Children die, Joel. The world isn't reflected around Ellie. It's like an interesting parallel again that we had there. And we saw how that played out. And then we're seeing how this plays out as well. I just thought that was a really interesting kind of connection. Again, me just connecting threads in my mind.
And to bring up Kathleen as well and other moments throughout the season, the focal point of betrayal, and I know we kind of alluded to that. We knew that there would be this idea of betrayal coming up in this moment. And there is the question of who betrayed Ellie. Was Ellie betrayed? Because she said, I want to see this to the end. And did Marlene betray Ellie, or did Joel betray Ellie? And so it's an interesting, definitely open for conversation topic, but that was also explored a lot. And I think betrayal was something really prominent in Kathleen's storyline.
Yeah, no, huge. We obviously get like a brief cut as well back to Marlene's bleeding out on the floor. She's like kind of begs Joel just to let me go. And then obviously Joel just says, you don't need to come after her, and then just shoots her in cold blood. Obviously, like, again, this father saying, look, nobody's going to get her now. I'm going to save her. I'm making this decision. I'm eradicating all threats, and gets rid of her. And then we kind of get like a winding down of everything here, which is really, really kind of nice. Like these beautiful lingering shots of like driving through like these, the woods and like the hills of like Wyoming, which is beautiful. Obviously very much again from the game where the car breaks down. Ellie and Joel go on a hike. He says like, it's only going to be a 5-hour hike. Yeah, I think we can manage that, remember, because obviously that's what Ellie says as well in an earlier episode about them managing this 5-hour hike. And then they start to walk. And again, a lot of this is lifted from the video game where Joel, for the first time, starts to openly talk about and mention Sarah. Remember when they were in Jackson, he said, you do not discuss that. You do not talk about that. And now he feels like because he's got a new Sarah in his life, he's got a new Ellie, he can openly talk about her freely. And all of these comparisons that he makes, which I love when he's, he says like, she would have liked you. She was more girly. I'm not saying you're not girly, just like Ellie saying, I'm not. And like they laugh about that. I just thought it was really fun. And he says like, oh, she'd like you because you're funny. And then, you'd like her back. And Ellie agrees. And again, this is just such a movement from Joel. We're seeing all of this in this episode where, for all that we see, like, Joel is, now this protector of Ellie, but also how he sees her and how he's able to open up and talk about his trauma because he's processed that, because in many ways, Ellie has healed him.
Yeah, absolutely. I noticed the same thing about his willingness to talk about Sarah. I thought it was definitely that we're seeing again a different Joel. He did a 180. He's more open now. And I think that him being able to speak about Sarah, as you skillfully noted, is indicative of him resolving some of that trauma. And the idea of Sarah and him living within that regret and having that nightmare continuously throughout the season comes from this idea that he wasn't able to protect her. And so his choice in saving Ellie is so rooted in the idea of protecting Ellie or kind of making up for not being able to protect Sarah. He hasn't been able to live with himself because he wasn't able to do what was right by Sarah. And he's had to live with that for 20 years now. Right. And so he knew he wasn't going to be able to live with that again, and that there was no way, so I think him being able to resolve that a little bit allows him to explore the Sarah conversation a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely. There's so much resolution in that, and allows him to open up and talk about that now with somebody that he really trusts and respects, and kind of, has elevated her above so many more people in his life now. They get to a point when they overlook Jackson, in the distance, and then this is like the final section here, and I love this. This is so well played, where she tells him, like, look, this is the first time I killed someone. Like, I need to talk to you about that. Like, I had a friend who, we see like what happened in episode 7, Riley, like I had to kill her. Like, we did the similar thing where it's very similar to kind of, again, like, we're talking about the episode 3 when, like, the guys said to each other, look, we'll just live out our lives. Like, we'll both die at the same time. That's what Ellie and Riley were going to try and do. Obviously, Ellie didn't turn. Riley did. She had to kill her. And then Joel kind of says to her here, like, tries to say, like, don't blame yourself. Like, this is not your fault. And you've always got to find something worth fighting for. That is what your drive will be. That is what your goal will be. And I like that she cuts him off and just says, "Swear to me, everything you said about the Fireflies is true." And he says, "I swear." The look on Ellie's face here when he says that is very much where she doesn't know whether to believe him or not. Kind of just looking at him, and she knows he's saying it. She knows what type of person. She's weighing up everything in her mind at this point. The whole journey they've been on together, the type of person that Joel is. Like for all that she trusts him, like with her life, and that he'll protect her. But what he's saying to her right now, she's kind of piecing everything together in her mind, thinking, is that the truth? And then she just goes like, okay. And obviously we cut to the end there. But again, like that nicely references going into the second game and how that relationship with Joel and Ellie continues to, it's that unsurety, right? And we get that, and obviously how that plays out when we look at the second one as well. But just such a strong, powerful ending, right?
Yeah. And just ending on the words, I swear.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean, it really sets up the next season. It's so simple, it's so effective.
Mm-hmm.
I think Ellie is
Yeah.
also, there's so much evidence in this episode that reveals Ellie is very with it. And I think she knows deep down that
Yeah.
Joel is not telling the truth.
Mm-hmm.
His story isn't necessarily believable. There are a bunch others like you. Okay, so then why did I travel across the fucking country? If there's so many others like me,
Right.
where are my clothes? Why am I in my hospital gown? Oh, there are
Mm-hmm.
raiders and people aren't okay, and now you're kind of not giving me an answer if Marlene's okay
Mm-hmm.
after you just revealed how important you were to me or I am to you. I believe that Ellie is just processing everything, and I think that she respects Joel and she does see him as a protector and a father figure, but again, going back to their dialogue in the beginning of this episode, there's a sense of nurturing that's not present anymore. And Ellie doesn't need Joel to affirm her place in this world. And so Ellie maybe is more um her thoughts and actions are more self-defined.
Mm-hmm.
And so they are separate from Joel. For the first time we're noticing they're very separate from Joel. And so there's a bit of herself that's been removed from Joel. And I think she's able to observe a little bit that Joel isn't emotionally trustworthy person, which brings me back to Jackson, in which Maria when she cuts Ellie's hair, starts telling Ellie that Joel isn't to be trusted, that
Right.
the people who are closest to us sometimes aren't meant to be trusted. And
Absolutely.
so, and she emphasizes that sometimes people keep secrets and don't tell each other things. And I think that that's an important, that, or rather, that is a present thought process within Ellie right now. So I think she's muscling through it. It's definitely going to come up in next season as it did in the next game.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
so I'm interested to see how it plays out. Although I have every faith it's going to play out pretty similarly to the game.
Right, yeah. And I love that point you brought about Maria as well. That's a really interesting point because we saw in the last episode how, Ellie learned from that and straight away was very quick to not trust like David and obviously everybody else around that situation, but as well to take that analyzing of people and knowing when to trust people, and especially applying it here with Joel, knowing that he hasn't given her all of the information that she needs. Doesn't know about Marlene or anything like that. He's been very cagey about information. And her trust there is, although I can trust, as I said, Joel with my life to protect me, but he isn't telling me the full thing here. And I think you're right, Joey. Deep down, she knows that he is lying to her. And it's about finding out that why. And obviously, we go into that in the second season as well. And then we get the end. That is it. That is the finale, the end of this season. I just want to obviously ask Joey, what was your thoughts of like the finale, the way like it all wrapped up, and kind of your general thoughts of the season overall compared to like the game, and obviously maybe some highlights or anything like that from your entire journey with The Last of Us.
I think that the way that we dissected and approach dissecting the show gave light to the two different relationships people can have with the show.
Right.
One being my first watch throughs, which are more simply enjoyable. I like the storyline, I'm entertained, and I care for the game, and so I care for the show. And the second is when we lean into deep analysis we see the intricacies that are present, and that level of nuance that is available if you look for it is so artistically impactful and
Mm,
meaningful to me. It is exactly all that I look for when I am watching a show, watching a movie, reading a book, playing a game. All of that was so present in the game, but it has been elevated and it has been heightened. And just talking about this 45-minute episode, how we're able to really go in depth and talk about how so many things tie together and so many aspects revolve around another. There was such an intention behind crafting the show. There was so much
mm,
integrity. There was so much perspective. And I think that this episode, along with the entire season, were just simply phenomenal.
mhm. Yeah, I agree. Like this for me is this is how you do top tier television. And like although that as I said earlier, we had the blueprint of like the video game, which again is one of like the greatest video games, like incredible. Like genuinely one of the greatest stories I think for me told in a video game, how cinematic it was, how impactful it is, and still like, 10 years later to still be talking about the ending of a video game, but now with a TV show, just shows how strong it is and how much it still stands within society right now. Like incredible. And I think the TV show itself, like what it did the best is took the best parts of the video game, like really kind of showed them off for what they are, really showed the storytelling, the meat of the game, but also elevated more. It gave more kind of time for stuff to breathe, like episode 3, the Bill and Frank episode. Like give more time for these relationships to breathe, for us to really understand these characters, but not just like an individual character journey, but also the themes of that episode and how it ties into the rest of the show and how like characters go on similar journeys and make similar decisions all the way through this. And like that, the playground of like the world that they have this dystopia to play in and how they become these different people by playing in that ground, so to speak. It's just incredible. It's elevated. It's wonderful. Everything about this is top tier, from the acting to obviously the budget to the way it looks, the way it sounds, the music all the way through it. Everything is so well chosen. And that's why it's been an absolute pleasure to like do this whole journey with you, Joey, because, you and I love the show. We love the game and we can talk about it passionately, but also we can just talk about the, as you said, the intricacies of like how beautiful it weaves everything, how it explores different themes. The imagery in this show is just fantastic. And a lot of that, sometimes you get shows where, the acting's great, the budget's fantastic, but it leaves out a lot of this, going on over here. And I think The Last of Us perfectly brings all of that together and weaves it through so well. It was a pleasure to watch, and it was a pleasure to go through with you as well.
Thank you, Adam. I entirely agree. And as I said at the start, to really explore something that means a lot to me, um, in such a deep analysis, which is something that I really love to do, and I don't often have the space to do it. It's been a
Right.
lot of fun, and it has enlarged the space of The Last of Us in my soul and in my heart. So thank
Mm.
you. It's been a pleasure.
No, thank you. And finally, what would you give the episode out of 10?
I think, I teetered because I was like, it's very good.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm kind of going back to episode 3 and the level of impact that had on me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, if that's a 10, is this a 10? But I landed on 10 for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Same.
that it just really, really, really summarizes and captures in an easeful, eloquent way that is, I don't know, it was just really nice.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so deep, yet if you didn't look deep, it was equally as good.
Yeah. No, I agree. Like I had 10 out of 10 written down. I've got it right there on the paper. And like for me, it does that thing again, like what episode 3 did to me. Episode 3 like still lingers in my mind now. And like this final episode is still lingering in my mind. I'm still thinking about that decision that Joel made at the end. I'm still thinking about Ellie not trusting him like fully, with like understanding why he did what he did potentially. And like all of that, it just stays with me. And I think that's, as I said earlier, this is the mark of like for me, great art and great work. The stuff that lingers with you afterwards and you're still thinking about it and you're still questioning things and it's asking you to question things as well. It does that brilliantly. So for me, it's a 10 out of 10. And as you know, to lift from episode 3, like I will be thinking about this show for a long, long time. Like just brilliant, 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 brilliant. All right, Joey, where can everybody find you? Tell them for the final time covering The Last of Us, where everyone can find you on socials.
You can find me on my personal social media sites at Joey Dean Official, specifically TikTok and Instagram. Or you can listen to my band King Vagabond on Spotify or all other streaming platforms and follow us on socials at The King Vagabond.
There you go. So as I tell you all the time, go and check out Joey's socials and King Vagabond. Get their music in your ears immediately. Ah, this feels so final. But yeah, so obviously, I just want to say, first of all, before I go into socials, thank you everybody for listening. Thank you for the people that's watched as well. This has been 9 weeks of Joey and I doing this together of 9 episodes. It's been an absolute pleasure. And believe me, there will be more coming from the podcast. But if you do want to check us out, obviously, all of our episodes are recorded onto my YouTube channel. So if you just type in my name, you will find the episodes on there. But we are obviously available on all podcast platforms to listen to as well. We are also available on all socials. So if you type in Last Week on Pod on Twitter and on Instagram, you will find us on there. Come and chat to us on there if you want as well. And if you want to follow me, I am at Straughan87 on Twitter and on Instagram. So if you type that in, you will see my face. So again, Joey, for the last time, I just want to say a big thank you for the last 9 weeks going all the way through The Last of Us. This has been my pleasure, absolute pleasure. And yeah, we'll see you back for season 2.
Absolutely. I'll be there.
All right. Looking forward to it. Okay, everyone. Until next time, take care.
Bye.